I'm in Redfern today, and I'm also the chair of Our Watch, the National Prevention of Violence Against Women organisation. I'm joining you from Gadigal land, and I pay my respect to elders past and present, and the ancestors, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded and that this was, is, and always will be Aboriginal land. I acknowledge all Aboriginal people joining us here today for this important launch of Saving Face. And thank you to everybody who's joining us here this morning. I know that this is a piece of work that has taken many, many years to develop, and it's such an exciting opportunity on the International Day of Peace to be able to be a part of this launch. So I thank everyone for joining us. And I thank Muslim Women's Australia for inviting me to be a small part of this. I'll be your MC for this morning. We have some exceptional speakers, and the sector guide itself, I personally think, having had an advanced copy, really takes us to the next level in terms of the conversation that we need to be having about response and prevention of violence against women, domestic and family violence. As I said, this has been a really long journey, and it's representative, I think, today of the work that that Maha, my friend Maha, and MWA have done in communities across Australia, bridging those gaps. This work is not something that has just come out of, a piece of work in the last couple of years. It's a testament to having really difficult, challenging conversations at a community level with everybody participating equally and respectfully, understanding that sometimes we're working across structural challenges, sometimes we're working across differences, but we all come with hearts that desire to make this nation a safer place for women and children across the country. So I'd like to welcome Charlene McKenzie, the Managing Director of Alawa Aboriginal Corporation, who's going to do an acknowledgement of country for us this morning. Thank you, Charlene.
Thanks, Moo. Let me start by acknowledging the traditional owners of all the countries that we're on. I notice that there's people coming in from Broken Hill and that beautiful part of the state. I'm on Gweagal land, so I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and I'd also like to pay my respects to my ancestors and elders from the Wiradjuri Nation. I would like to pay my respects to my wonderful sisters from Muslim Women's Australia, and show my appreciation for the wonderful work that you do. Being a person who was brought up in domestic violence and has real lived experience of it, I know how important this work is. And I know I love the change that you're bringing to the sector. I hope that everyone enjoys today. And can I just ask people to be mindful in the political climate that we have of my people who are being subjected to some really horrible things. Can I remind you that it doesn't matter what your opinion is, whether you're a yes or a no, we're all human beings. We should all treat each other with, kindness and respect and love. So I just want to leave you with that. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Charlene. And yes, I would echo. We see a great deal of harm being done on the streets, online particularly, and it's doing great hurt and harm to First Nations people across this country. And agreed, regardless of whether we're going to vote yes or no, it is the responsibility of all of us to make sure that we're taking care and spreading peace in an active way. We're all here because we are peace activists in some shape or form, and it's our responsibility to spread that peace and to do that in a way that is growing Australia and growing our communities rather than detracting and dividing. Thank you, Charlene. I'm now going to pass over to my good friend, Maha Abdo. Maha needs very little introduction. I think everybody on this call today will have had some sort of interaction with Maha and knows that she is one of the most passionate advocates. But also, I don't know too many people who walk the talk more than Maha. Maha and I have worked together and known each other for at least a decade now, and she's a passionate advocate for social justice and uses the language of faith to clarify in community how Islam regards justice and equality, which is incredibly powerful. She serves as the CEO of Muslim Women Australia, a community-based organisation that caters to the educational, religious, social, recreational and welfare needs of Muslim women from all backgrounds. And she and I have walked together alongside one another for many years now, and I feel very honoured to have a relationship and a friendship with Maha and the other wonderful women from MWA. So Maha, I'm going to pass over to you now.
Thank you. And I mean, in the name of peace, there's no language that actually can be described as anything else but a language of peace. Is a language of the heart, the currency of the heart that is really missing right now. And quite clearly what you've just said, Charlene, sits with my heart, and you're clearly right. We need to learn to do things better, even though we may disagree on certain things. And I've lived all my life with so many people disagreeing on so many things that at times I've actually gone into my car and bawled my eyes out, but never did I ever directly take out my pain on other people. And this is a culmination, I suppose, of the great way that, as a gateway to my faith and something that I'm committed to. It's not just me, myself and I, it's about us, all of us. And that's why, Charlene, you and I get on so well, because it's about us, our community, our diversity, clearly that we don't have to agree on everything to be united. And being united doesn't mean we all have to be clones of one another. And on that, I want to sincerely acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we all stand on, that we are all being privileged to have been living here, whether we came in the early days or we came migrants, or we were part of the Macassans and the Indonesians, the early Muslims that came to the country, that lived harmoniously with the land and its people and created that sign of peace in a way. But we are where we are today, and acknowledging those the spirits that are with us, those that will come after us, and those that have come before us, because we walk on the shoulders of many giants that are not written anywhere. And these are the giants that have helped us and helped us develop our currency of our heart. And being on International Day today is an amazing day to be. And when I was thinking, what is peace? To me, peace is not a distant dream. And I like to see it as a mosaic that we can all build on, because we're all so different, yet we are all the same. We all bleed the same, we all feelings, we have the same aspirations. And for 35 years of my life, I've lived it, and I never thought I'd live this day to see that we're using faith as a tool for empowerment. And this year's theme is action for peace. And clearly what Mu was saying, we are activists in peace, and we're going to create an avalanche of peace, but creating it within a framework of faith-based. And you don't have to agree with everything, but when you really give it that clear awareness, take that collective responsibility and foster peace in action, remember there's dignity in the space, dignity and respect. So today, as we come together on this on this day, as myself, as you know, I'm the CEO, and I was about to retire 4 years ago. But COVID came in, and COVID said to me, you're not retiring. So I'm back I mean, I haven't left. I didn't even leave, but I am here, and we have a succession planning. As part of our succession planning is really make sure we build capacity in our young people to drive the passion that we all work with. And for 35 years of my lived experience in the sector, in my community around, there's so much to bring. But I'm sincerely honoured to introduce this amazing guideline. It's called, Saving Faith. And when we came up with that name, there's so much to it, because I wanted to bring faith and I wanted to bring culture and empowerment into the space. And that's what it stands for, faith and cultural empowerment. It is a sector guide. It is a vital resource, and it represents an amazing, significant step forward. But when we need to step forward, we need to know what we're stepping on there. So there has to be a way, a vision that we all share. And that is collectively to address the endemic issue of violence against women and children within all of our communities, inclusive of everybody. So Saving Face is a guide, and it is a culmination of countless hours of research, collaboration, disagreement, dedication, laughs, tears, but it is brought together by experts. And acknowledging Brother Ghaith, who's done amazing work in the last 4 years, bringing that to the fruition that it is. And it is deeply committed to eradicating violence from our homes and society. And the guide is as we said earlier, it came out of the realization that, you know what, to truly address this issue, we talk about it, everyone's talking about, we want to address it, we want to do that. And I've been putting my hand up and saying, we've got to include the men, mate. We can't do this without the men. It's not the women's problem all the time. We can't re-victimize the women. So I remember when I used to say it in the early days, I was literally, my voice was very silenced. But that's okay, because at that time, women were busy doing other things. But it is what it is. But last year, it was amazing. There was a significant milestone in Australia, in New South Wales, where the previous government launched, they brought together faith leaders to sign the Faith Leaders Declaration at Parliament House, New South Wales. And that declaration clearly and resolutely identified the need for faith leaders to be informed about the pervasive problem of domestic violence, while emphasising the importance of building capacity within service providers and government agencies. And it underscored the urgent need to apply faith-based principles, and that we were working on that already. And I thought, oh my goodness, how everything are aligned now. And the declaration is a powerful testament to our commitment as a community to address domestic violence, irrespective of our faith or cultural background. But it acknowledges that faith and faith leaders have an amazingly crucial role to play, and raising awareness to using faith as a tool for empowerment, not to disempower. And that's inclusive of being aware and understand, how do you dismantle the harmful beliefs and behaviours that perpetuate violence. We can't just turn a blind eye to these things. We've got to really be very aware that this sector guide as well aligns perfectly with the vision set forth in that Faith Leaders Declaration, and you can see the declaration online. It is available on our website as well, and on the New South Wales Government website. It is a comprehensive resource, actually. But just bring you back to the guide itself, we aim to empower individuals within the community to speak out against domestic violence. It is important that we need to break the cycle of abuse. We need to provide support to men, women and children, and it is a testament to our unwavering commitment to creating safer, more compassionate communities for all of us. But as we are sitting here from all parts of Australia, really, we need to realise that the success of this guide depends on all and each one of us. It can't be sitting online or on the shelves to collect dust. This is a work together in action. It relies on our collective sincere commitment to take action, to engage in authentic dialogue, and that I mean authentic dialogue. You've got to be able to have that conversation where you're not feeling comfortable about something, and that's what we do. That's what we're providing training for the sector guide. And irrespective of what values or you bring in, because we all have that sincere dedication to equality, justice for all, bring compassion into the space. And I know my time is coming to a close, but in just wrapping it up, we need to remember that the Save Your Face Sector Guide is not just a document, like I said earlier, but what I see it is a beacon of hope. It's a symbol and a beacon of hope and a blueprint for change. It is a testament to our shared determination. We want to eradicate violence against women, but we want to do it inclusive of men as well. It's a call to action, a reminder that our faith and cultural backgrounds can be powerful tools in our quest for a safer and more equitable society. So let's make a commitment today to use this guide as a foundation upon which to build our future, where violence has no place, where every woman and child can live free from fear, and whether our faith and cultural principles guide us toward a more just and compassionate world. And with our unwavering commitment to this cause, it is an inspiration for all of us. As we want to use this guide as a compass, let us be the agents of change within our faith-based communities and outside in the sector, wherever we are. Let us use that model as a guiding tool to really create a space where we foster togetherness in a way that we try and work together in an informed way, that we can create a brighter, more harmonious future for all. And on that note, I just want to remember our dearest sister who not long ago was killed by her partner just down the road from us, Sister Amira. And with her being a victim that was, that I can't say that we could have prevented, it is a fate, but we want to prevent any other traumatic experience for many women and children. And I sincerely appreciate all of you listening and coming in here to collectively come and bring your hearts to the space, and let's bring our collective hearts and efforts to bear fruit in the journey to a violence-free present for the future. And thank you, and peace be with you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much, Maha. You always speak so beautifully, and every time I hear you speak, and it's been many, many times now, I just reflect on how genuinely dedicated you are to this work across every part of our community. It's so important that we are engaging faith-based communities in this conversation, and it's this sector guide, for me personally, somebody who's been around for a while in this space, just speaks across the response, early intervention, primary prevention and healing and recovery space that we have articulated in the national plan. So I'm delighted to be able to introduce the Honourable Justine Elliott, the Assistant Minister for Social Services and Assistant Minister for the Prevention of Family Violence. Many of you will know Assistant Minister Elliott. She's the Federal Labor member for Richmond and lives on the New South Wales North Coast. I think you're there today, aren't you, Justine? I am. I won't do your whole bio because I want to hear you speak. Thank you so much for joining us here today. It's really, really delightful to have you here as part of this important moment. Thank you.
Look, thank you so much, Moo, and please call me Justine. I'm so pleased to be here today with all of you and have been so touched by all the comments you've made so far, and it is a real honour to be part of this incredibly important launch. I also especially want to thank you, Charlene, for that acknowledgement of country as well. And of course, as Moo said, I am calling from the New South Wales North Coast, which is beautiful Bundjalung country. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And of course, I extend that respect to any First Nations people who are joining us at the launch today. I would also like to add that I very, very much look forward to voting yes on October 14th to enshrining constitutional recognition for Australia's First Peoples. And I would like to reiterate the words that Charlene referred to earlier about ensuring that we have a respectful debate right across the country. And that's an issue that I honestly raise in every forum that I am in, because we want to ensure that people's voices are heard in an incredibly respectful way. Of course, I'd also like to acknowledge Maha Abdo, and I thank you for that wonderful introduction. And I particularly like how you referred to thanking everyone for bringing their hearts to this space. I think that really does highlight exactly what all of us in this area are doing, all bringing our hearts to this space to get much better outcomes. Of course, I'd like to acknowledge our wonderful Commissioner, Michaela Cronin, who does an outstanding job as our Commissioner for Domestic, Family and Sexual Violence. Lovely to see you, Michaela. And also, can I acknowledge Dr. Hannah Tonkin, New South Wales Women's Safety Commissioner. And of course, the wonderful Moo Baulch. Thank you, Moo, for the work that you're doing today, and also the Director of Primary Prevention at Women and Girls Emergency Centre and the Chair of Our Watch. We all greatly admire the ongoing work that you do in this area. I, of course, would also like to pay tribute to anyone attending today who has lived experience of family, domestic or sexual violence, and to note that your voices are foremost in our minds and our hearts in this area. And I would like to add that I admire your strength and your resilience. So as the Assistant Minister for the Prevention of Family Violence in the Albanese government, I'm really honoured to have the opportunity to highlight and celebrate the vital work of Muslim Women Australia in seeking to stop gender-based violence before it starts. And of course, our government is committed to delivering real and lasting change to end family, domestic and sexual violence and creating a safer nation for all women and children. And to achieve this goal, we're driving action right across the board, including by supporting outstanding projects like yours, Saving Face project. It's crucial that we support programs that work to change attitudes and behaviours that can lead to violence. And of course, this can be by working with perpetrators to reduce the risk of violent behaviour reoccurring, or by working genuinely with the community to change perceptions about violence towards women. And it is so critical that we do this across all cultural and religious backgrounds. And that's why I'm so pleased to be officially launching this project today. And as you all know, ending violence requires sustained collective action across all of the areas of society, right throughout the nation. And there's a role for individuals, communities and organisations, including faith-based organisations, to actively challenge the attitudes and behaviours that cause and condone violence against women and children. And what's great about this guide is it'll provide vital advice to practitioners on how to better engage with men of Muslim faith within the framework of their religious beliefs. And it will provide family, domestic and sexual violence service practitioners with the tools to promote prevention of violence with men in a way that recognises their agency and respects and reflects their faith and aligns with their values. And that's why it's so incredibly important. And changing and shifting these attitudes and behaviours is so integral to preventing gender-based violence. This involves engaging effectively with men and boys from all walks of life, all cultures, backgrounds and faiths. And by engaging with men and boys in a way that makes sense and resonates with them, we can help encourage them to embed violence prevention into not just their family and homes, but with their friends and across all settings within society. And the sector guide will build the domestic and family violence sector's capacity to engage in culturally, linguistically and religiously appropriate support. And I really want to thank and congratulate everyone at Muslim Women Australia who has been involved in the production of this important guide. I know how much dedication and commitment has gone into this guide. And I also want to acknowledge that this November marks the 40th anniversary of MWA and therefore 40 years of serving the community, a great achievement that should be recognised and celebrated. And your hard work and passion has resulted in a much needed resource that will help create real change from within the heart of communities. Now, as mentioned earlier, this project importantly aligns with the suite of preventative work the government is undertaking to support the implementation of our foundational strategy, the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children. And the plan describes how all parts of society must work together over the next 10 years to achieve our shared vision of ending gender-based violence in one generation. And it does recognise the vital importance of working on primary prevention with men and boys and of acknowledging and addressing the complexities experienced by people from culturally, linguistically and religiously diverse backgrounds. We acknowledge that. And the National Plan acknowledges that faith and community leaders play such an important role in promoting change, as well as working to create the conditions that prevent violence, abuse, discrimination and harassment. Now, under Action 3 of the National Plan's first action plan, governments across Australia have committed to increase and strengthen the capability of mainstream and specialist workforces to deliver quality services, activities and programs. And this guide is a realised and practical way to support services to deliver upon this action. And delivering programs that work with men and boys in a culturally sensitive way and empower them to champion women's safety within their own belief and value system, like the Saving Face project does, is right at the heart of what we are all collectively committed to achieving. Now, of course, the Saving Face Guide is one of many critical prevention initiatives the government funds to support young men and boys in Australia to learn and understand about violence, consent and respect. This includes the funding provided to support Our Watch and its incredibly important work as the national leader in primary prevention. And projects like Our Watch is the Line importantly provide skills and tools to support people to challenge the norms, attitudes and behaviours that drive violence against women. And Our Watch are also involved in designing and testing innovative approaches to working with men and boys to prevent gender-based violence. And I acknowledge that outstanding work that Our Watch does. In addition, the government is providing more than $77 million for education on consent and healthy relationships in schools, with $3.5 million dedicated to Teach Us Consent social media resources about sexual violence and consent for over 16s. And we recognise, we know that educating boys and young men about healthy and respectful relationships is key to addressing gender inequality and preventing violence. And through these types of programs, we can help give them ways to understand, really understand the effects of gender-based violence and to change harmful attitudes they may hold around gender, respect or consent. Finally, I really want to thank everyone online today for the work that you all do right throughout the Family, Domestic and Sexual Violence Centre. I understand and know your passion and commitment to this area, and your dedication to ensuring everyone from all cultural backgrounds and religious beliefs are supported, empowered and provided with the opportunities to learn. The work that you do in this space is truly admirable. And we know the Saving Face Sector Guide will be vital in helping us to shape and inform the next steps we take towards our shared goal. And it's our shared goal of ending violence against women and children in one generation. Thank you all for your contributions today and your ongoing contributions to achieve this shared goal. And especially thank you for the invitation to be here today for this incredible launch. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Justine, for your work, for your advocacy. and for being on the collective journey with us. I think the work of embedding gender equality, respect, and dignity, as Maha talks about it, is, it is generational work. It's something that we are all deeply committed to, regardless of where we come from, whether we come from, public, private sector, the community sector. And I'd really like to thank you for your commitment to end gender-based violence in a generation, and also just for your support for the important national structures and systems that we need in order to be able to, build a really strong evidence base about what works. Absolutely. Nationally across our whole population, but also at a community level as well. Thank you for your support of our watch. We love working alongside you and other governments to really start to shift attitudes and behaviours in Australia. So thank you, and thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you being with us. Yeah,
absolute honour to be here. Thank you so much to everyone. Thank you.
So it's now my pleasure to invite Michaela Cronin, the Federal Women's Safety Commissioner, to talk to us. She's going. I should do a little bit of a bio of you, because I've had the pleasure of spending some time with you, Michaela, but I don't know if everybody here will know you. Michaela commenced as Australia's first Domestic, Family and Sexual Violence Commissioner on the 1st of November, Michaela. It feels like you've been around in this space doing this important work a lot longer than that. But Michaela began her career as a social worker in family violence and sexual assault services. She's held leadership roles across the social services sector in Australia and internationally. And I'm not going to talk too much more, Michaela. I'm going to pass over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Moo. Assalamu alaikum. It's very good to be here with everybody. Peace be with you all. And I want to join in all the acknowledgements and of the people who are here. Maha, it is wonderful to have had the invitation and to be here. And I agree, I'm with you. It would be lovely to be here in person. But it does mean that the good thing about learning to do these things online, and you are all doing it so seamlessly, I just want to say thank you to the crew who are making it work so well, is that we can be more inclusive and that more people can come than would be able to if we were in person. So we're getting better at it, but I am missing being in the room with you. Can I thank Charlene for the acknowledgement and join with her on acknowledging the lands that we are on. I am on Wurundjeri lands. I'm back home. I was born on Wurundjeri lands and I'm back home today, which is nice. I've been doing lots of travelling. I'm a daughter of a migrant. I'm a daughter of, I'm a third generation social worker, and I am very proud of the women in my family's commitment to this work. But it does mean that I am very aware of my connection to this place, but also what the richness of the diversity of the community that we are in. So acknowledging that these lands are Aboriginal lands and that we need to pay our deep respects to our First Nations people. And I agree, Charlene, about the need for respect at this time. It is a painful time for many people and much harm is being done. Thank you to the Assistant Minister. Thank you, Justine. I've been on the agenda. It says I'm going to talk about alignment with the National Plan and the Commission's work. The Assistant Minister has done a beautiful job of talking about the alignment with the National Plan. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about the Commission's work, because as Moo said, it does feel like a long time, but it's less than a year. And one of the things that somebody reminded me is that part of my job is to actually just keep introducing what the Commission's work is so that people know how to connect and engage with what we are here to do. So the Commonwealth Government established the Commission, and it does create us with an opportunity to bring together and amplify the work that is already existing. The Commission has four roles, four aspects to the Commission's role. And the first is that piece around alignment to the National Plan. This is our second National Plan. We have come a long way under the first 10-year, but as Maha, you talked about at the start, we've got a long way to go. And we know that women and children are being harmed every day in our communities. So part of the Commission's role is, on the one hand, to promote it and at the same time to hold governments accountable to the commitment. And one of the things that I think is very special about this plan is that every state and territory have committed to it, and we've just had 2 action plans launched last month. Yes, it is last month in August, that are laying the roadmap for the next 5 years about how we will actually implement. And they're live documents that will be updated on a yearly basis in terms of not the document itself, but our commitment to action. So that's one aspect of the Commission's role. The second that is very relevant to this piece of work, the guide and the work that Muslim Women Australia do, is amplifying the voices of people with lived experience. There's a lovely quote in the guide that really resonated for me with the work that and my commitment to this work, which is a solution drawn from the values and beliefs of the community itself has the greatest chance of success. I think all of us would like to see much more rapid change than we are seeing, and there's a tension between wanting things to change now, quickly, and knowing that if we are going to have sustainable long-term change, then it takes a long time. But at its core, it requires us to listen to diverse voices, to know and engage at a community place, both community that are broader than place and also communities within place that know what their needs are, that know what speaks to members of their communities. In the job that I held working overseas, I was working with women, an organisation that worked with women and children who'd experienced human trafficking and, as part of that, sexual and domestic violence. And I did some work in Afghanistan, and we did some work there with faith leaders about how do you conceptualise within your faith both protection of women and children, but we had a really interesting piece of work around foster care and how foster care is viewed within faith, within Muslim faith in particular, and recognising the need for the valuing and working with experts in that faith, experts within faith and culture and community, as a critical driver of change. How do we engage those different voices? How do we respect the work that they are already doing to keep community building, community well-being at the core of the work that you do? So that's the second aspect of the Commission's work, is actually how do we create both support and amplify existing work, like the work that is done by Muslim Women Australia, to hear the voices of the very diverse voices of people with lived experience, but also ensure that we have ongoing mechanisms and embed those things over long periods of time so that government representatives and systems listen to communities and hear what it is that those communities need, and honour and hand over power to those communities so that they are able to lead for themselves. Because if we are going to see the change that we all very much are committed to seeing, we need to change some of our practices. And at the core, one of the aspects to that is listening to communities. The third aspect of the Commission's work is around coordination and collaboration, and how do we work across our silos? And those silos exist in many, many different forms. They exist across cultures, across geography, across funding streams. I know organisations often say, well, we kind of are seen as this type of an organisation because that's where we grew out of. A cultural organisation, we're not seen as, well, but actually, hang on, we provide a whole lot of direct service delivery. So how can we bring those silos together and ensure that we are learning from the richness of those the places that you come from and the knowledge that you hold. And that's why this guide is such an incredibly rich and valuable tool, because it is sharing in a very sharing both for within your own communities, but also more broadly. You know, I mean, for across the sector, this is an incredibly rich resource. And that piece around understanding where other people come from. One of the things that embeds silos and increases fragmentation is not understanding each other's professional and cultural language, the way we talk about things and understand the meaning of that. So that's part of why it's so important for the Commission to be working with all of you. The fourth aspect is around strategic policy advice to government and listening to what are the things that will actually make a difference in your community. What are the things that we need to be paying attention to, and listening to what comes up from within your community. I'm going to stop there. I really am very pleased to be part of this today, Maha. I think it shows the respect for your work that so many people were wanting to show up and support the launch today. So thank you very much to you. Assalamu alaikum, and peace be with you, and I look forward to working with you into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Michaela. It's so important that people understand the role and the scope and the way that they can work with the Commission. I think we're very lucky to have some strong institutions in Australia, and the Commission's relatively new, but it's such a critical part of elevating the voices and amplifying the community voices and expertise, which is what this project's all about. You know, really sharing those voices, both of lived expertise, but also of the people who are working in community, who, you know, 10 or 20 years ago may not have identified that what they were doing was primary prevention or response work. We will only solve this if we're all in it together. So your contribution is so important. And thanks for being here this morning. I have already messed up as an MC, and so I'm actually going to share with you now, or I'm going to ask Fida to share the video, a couple of quick videos actually of some participants in the program. And what I'd ask everybody to do is to just turn your volume up, because the sound on these is a little bit low. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jafar, and this is my son Haider. And for the launch of Saving Face, we would like to share our thoughts on the resource guide.
So Saving Face is a great initiative for our community, especially for young people like myself, to have these conversations that challenge the misconceptions so that the next generation is helping to end the cycle of violence against women and their families.
I think for our community, it gives us the right knowledge and language to articulate our faith while still countering family and domestic violence. I think it's important to support women and educate men and the wider community in promoting respectful relationships.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Andri Nur Savitri. I'm the President of Indonesian Muslim Community of Victoria. We have been established as an organization for the last 15 years approximately. And as an organization, we have 3 centers or 3 mosques. One is in Laverton, which is Masjid Baitul Ma'mur in Laverton. We have the second masjid, which is in Coburg. It's called Surau Kita. And then the last one is we have Masjid Westall, which is in the southeast. As an organization, we felt like the session today, the workshop that is run by Brother Ghaith Krayem is very, very good. We learn a lot from the presentation, from the workshops, and this is something about domestic violence or family violence is something that the community of the Indonesian community needs to know more, and we don't do these things a lot. So the session today, the workshop today is very beneficial to all of us, and hopefully we can hold something like this in the future in our other centers in the southeast or the centers in Coburg up north. And I'm sure Brother Ghaith and his team have done tremendous work in this area, especially in the area of faith and community empowerment, to at least minimize the family violence or the domestic violence that is happening still until these days. And we hope we can work together with Brother Ghaith and his team. Thank you very much.
It's so powerful for those of us who could hear the voices of men and young people speaking on this issue. It's incredible to see those videos, and I'm sure the MWA team will be sharing those later with people who maybe had some issues with the sound or the volume. I'm going to now pass over to Dr. Hannah Tonkin, who is the inaugural New South Wales Women's Safety Commissioner. She began the role, gosh, only earlier this year, wasn't it, Hannah? It feels as if you also have had an immensely busy year. And for those of you who've not had the pleasure of meeting Hannah, she provides leadership on whole of government and cross-sector initiatives to address domestic, family and sexual violence in New South Wales. Thank you so much, Hannah. Hannah's going to facilitate an important discussion this morning. So I'll pass over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, Moo. Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be with you today. I am joining you from Broken Hill. That's Wilyakali land, and I pay my respects to elders past and present, and also to any First Nations people on the line with us today. And thank you, Charlene, for that beautiful acknowledgement of country that we had at the beginning of this session. I'd also like to add my thanks to Muslim Women Australia for developing this fantastic guide and for organising this event today. We've had a really great collaboration ever since I first started in February this year. I've really appreciated and enjoyed all of the collaboration that we've had. So thank you very much for that, especially Maha and Nemat. And I hope that that continues in the coming months and years, as I'm sure it will. I don't want to spend too long on introductory comments because we have a great panel with us here today, 4 panellists. I would like to start by going around to each of the panellists and asking them to introduce themselves and giving a few, each panellist some high-level just opening remarks. And then I'll take you through a bit of a Q&A session where we can go into some of the issues in more detail. So starting with you, Annabelle.
Thanks very much, Hannah, and it's wonderful to be here. I'm coming from Gadigal land today, and so I pay my respects to elders past and present and to any Aboriginal and First Nations people on the line. My name's Annabelle Daniel. I'm the Chief Executive of Women's Community Shelters, which is an organisation that works with local communities around New South Wales to establish and open new crisis and transitional housing for women and kids. I also have the privilege of being the chair of the peak body for domestic and family violence services in New South Wales, Domestic Violence New South Wales, and I'm on the Coercive Control Implementation Task Force for New South Wales, and also chairing the Domestic and Family Violence Sector Reference Group there and the Lived Expertise Reference Group, and very excited to be here today and by this amazing resource that's been put together by Muslim Women Australia.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. Over to you, Britt.
Thanks, Hannah. Hi, everyone. My name is Britt. I'm joining from unceded Wurundjeri land here in Melbourne. So I want to acknowledge the elders past and present and any Indigenous people who are here with us today. I'm the Acting Head of Engagement at No to Violence. We're the largest peak body in Australia, and we represent individuals and organisations who work with men to address domestic and family violence. And thank you so much to Muslim Women's Australia for having me today.
Nemat, over to you.
Hi everyone, thank you Hannah. I'm coming to you all from Bidjigal country. My name is Nemat and I manage the Linking Hearts Multicultural Family Violence service at Muslim Women Australia. I'm also proud to be a colleague on the board of DV New South Wales with Annabelle, and I'm really excited to really have an authentic conversation around what this project has taken and how we can really embed specialist responses and whole of community approaches to supporting women's safety in a way that's inclusive of men. So thank you.
Thanks, Nemat. And last but not least, Ghaith.
Thank you, Hannah. I'm Ghaith. I'm also coming to you from Wurundjeri land, and I want to extend my acknowledgement to elders past, present, emerging, and who may still be with us on this as well. I'm the project lead for Saving Faith. I've lived and breathed this for the last, specifically for this project, the last 3 years or so, but the conversations Maha and I have had around the role of men go way back before that, and I actually reminded Maha, I came across a project brief that she and I put together back in 2017 for the New South Wales government on a project around elderly men working with young men within the Muslim community, so ways in which we can engage. And I actually want to thank DSS, our funder, because when they approved this project, it was actually quite a risky decision, I thought, for them to approve a project which was so faith-focused in an environment where faith is not that sexy a thing. Let's be honest about it, yeah. So it was really good that government saw the opportunity there, and it's fantastic that we're here today to see part of the outcome. I mean, the guide is only one of the outcomes of the whole project. But from a sector perspective, it's a really fantastic opportunity for us to look at different ways moving forward. We all know what the problem is. We all share and understand what the problem is, but solutions are myriad. They're as diverse as the people that we have within the community. And, you know, just to give you a sense of how diverse our own community is, in the 2016 census, so there are currently 195 recognised nation states across the world. In the 2016 census, the Australian Muslim community was drawn from 183 of those countries. So faith is what unites those 183 different cultures. And it's the door to open the way into change amongst those 183 different cultures. That's really what we're talking about today. So I'm looking forward to the conversation and any questions that might come up.
Thank you very much, Ghaith. I'd now like to go around the panel with some questions related to the sector to share your thoughts and reflections. The first theme I'd like to explore is this idea of whole of community approaches, which is such an important theme that comes through the sector guide. What does an authentic whole of community approach look like to you from your experience? Let me start with you, Britt.
I think that an authentic approach really does look at everyone in the community. I guess that's why it's called a whole of community approach. We know that we need buy-in from all levels. So we know that we need government help, we need community members, and everyone taking that consistent approach. We need not to just establish approaches, but to reinforce them and embed them into value systems. In my experience in the LGBTIQA+ sector, who are traditionally excluded from mainstream family violence services, really looked at creative and innovative responses to family violence that look at the whole community and how we can build on that to address family violence, but also prevent it for current and future generations. So I think we can take a lot of learnings from communities and how they have been able to really adapt and innovate new ideas.
Mm-hmm. I might take this over to you, Nemat. I know you've worked a lot on the guide specifically. What are your thoughts on an authentic whole of community approach?
Thanks, Hannah. I have so many thoughts. I'm going to try and be succinct, but I agree with what Britt's saying. As in, there's got to be consistent strengths-based approaches that allow for those those difficult conversations, and also allow for maybe areas where it does look different in different communities. I think what's so powerful about not just this guide, but the framework that it establishes, and is that it's so evidence-based. It's evidence-based in the fact that it's backed by the Baulch framework. It's evidence-based in that it's backed by models, research-based in the UK and in Australia that sort of provide a framework for what we know. But what it does is sort of allows it not to just be top down, but it allows it to sort of be ground up as well. And I think that's that beautiful balance point that we need to strike, so that we actually provide some thought leadership and leadership in action as well around how do we then engage, because while we need to bring all communities along and we need to do that in a really effective way, we need to do that in a way which doesn't undermine the women who've raised their voices in this space to do that. And so I think it's a delicate approach to and it's an approach that while we now all use the language of co-design and whole of community approaches and specialization, it wasn't always that way. It was a time where MWA was engaging in the space and saying men are part of the solution. We work in a complementary way. To not work in that way actually creates more harm for women in accessing safety or seeking help. And the fact that we've now come to a point where we can have that conversation in that way is really important. But as was rightfully said, it's not enough to just establish it. We need to embed it, we need to build on it, and we all have a role to play in how we do that. But it needs to be authentic, there needs to be trust, there needs to be respect, and even within our own community and our own organisation, who has so much trust and credibility in this space, we also had, you know, some challenges in that, and I know Ghaith can speak to that a lot better than I. So that's a little bit from my perspective.
Well, that's a good segue, perhaps straight over to you then, Ghaith.
Thanks. I guess a couple of points. In the guide itself, we actually spend a fair amount talking about leadership, because we know the issue of control is one of the biggest drivers around violence, and we present to the sector, but also in terms of our own community, concepts of prophetic leadership, and we draw this very important distinction between consultation and collaboration. And we're trying to drive the men within our own community to take a collaborative approach around leadership. And I guess the message is, as a sector, we need to shift to collaboration rather than consultation. Because collaboration really says, I'm actually interested in your ideas about what the problem is, not just your ideas about my solution to the problem. So we need to go way upstream when we're thinking about how we work together, and not just from a perspective of, well, here's a problem, here's what I think we should do, give me your views about that. Because straight away, that's narrowing the possible solutions, right? So we need to broaden our approach to all of those things. And you know, we all need to acknowledge that we have these unconscious biases, because it happened to me. So in this actual project itself, you know, I had thoughts around what I thought our community thought on these issues, which when I ran focus groups proved to be not completely wrong, but wrong in some really important aspects. So even on my own community, my own biases come into play, right? So we've got to take a step back and remember that we all bring our experiences and and all these sort of stuff into play in this space. And we do that at individual level, we do it at institutional level and at an organisational level. And I guess that's a big part of what the guide's really talking about, right? Just taking that step back and acknowledging that there's a contribution that's important by people from a whole range of different ways. And how do we build ways of working together where we respect but also leverage off all of those things? I think that's the real challenge for us.
I'm going to come back to you, Ghaith and Nemat, in just a moment, because I know how deeply involved you were in this project. But first of all, Annabelle, over to you for your reflections on authentic whole of community response or approach.
Well, yeah, thank you, Hannah. I don't think there could be a more authentic community response than what Muslim Women Australia has produced here. And it would be remiss of me not to mention, as chair of the peak body, that they were a founding member of DV New South Wales and also have been deeply embedded in specialist expertise and specialist responses for decades. And it's also so beautiful to see it come to this point where the work like Saving Face is recognised, celebrated and deemed important, because in some of the earlier days in domestic and family violence, Muslim Women Australia actually experienced pushback for working with men. And, you know, and it is so important to say, this is important work for us to do. We do have to embrace a whole of community approach. And what's more, we will do whatever it takes to get the solutions to this wicked problem. And so building a strong evidence-based framework to make that happen, to engage whole of community approaches, you know, my huge congratulations for this important piece of work. And certainly from what I see, I think Nemat summed it up beautifully when she said, you know, top down can only get us so far. We have to come in from the grassroots, work with communities, listen to all kinds of different points of view and build the solutions in collaboration together to make something happen. that is the only way we're going to shift the needle on the issue of domestic and family violence, because if domestic and family violence was an easy problem to solve, we would have solved it by now. It takes hard work, it takes conversation by conversation, it takes boots on the ground, and it takes really meeting people where they are, moving the needle and changing their hearts and minds person by person in order to affect the change that we want to see in Australia.
Thanks, Annabelle. I'd like to come back to you, Nemat. I know we've talked a lot about Muslim Women Australia's fantastic work with the Muslim community, but that's not your only focus. Your work is relevant more generally to everyone. And I'd like you just to explore that a little bit. What's distinctive about your approach to prevention in faith and minority communities, and what is applicable more generally? If you could just delve into that a little bit, that'd be great.
Thanks, Hannah, and thanks, Annabelle, for summarising that so beautifully. I think, you know, what I'm really passionate about with our work at MWA is that it's not a theoretical approach. This is embedded in practice. This is embedded in lived experience. And when we're talking about lived experience voices, we're committed to doing that in an ethical way that enhances outcomes, that enhances people's well-being, that enhances their agency and their autonomy and their dignity. So while we provide a multicultural service for domestic and family violence that grew out of the first ever Muslim Women's Refuge that used to exist in Australia, we're very proud to be able to look at victim survivors' experiences from a really intersectional way, a way that is client-centered, is trauma-informed. But what it does is it does not take a tick the box approach to cultural competency. When we enhance women's agency, and why I'm talking about women in this space before I talk about men is because that's exactly where this project grew out of. It grew out of working with victim survivors and continues to work with victim survivors. It grew out of understanding that, as Ghaith rightly said, power and control cuts across all cultures, all faiths, all languages, and all communities. And so what we actually saw in women's help-seeking behaviour was what they actually experience is this double bind when they're in a minority community, this double bind of wanting to seek help but not wanting to stigmatise and stereotype their communities. So it does feed into that safety framework and that cultural safety framework. But when we talk about cultural safety, it's not just what cultural background did you come from and which visa did you come from and how did your parents migrate. It's well beyond that. It's reframing that conversation to understanding culture, language to access services, but also what are the values that that person brings? What is their spiritual framework that can bring? And how does that tie into their spiritual activism? Because when we look at victim survivors' experiences as a family, holistically and collectively, not just individualistically in our model, that's the model that we provide, what we then do is take those learnings and work back. So we look at the woman in her own right. We look at her children as victims in their own right. We acknowledge that boys aged 12 to 17 in this area have very little culturally appropriate support services. And then we work backwards and we say, what have we learned from that practice experience to enhance men's responses to working with their communities in a proactive sense? And so that's what I'm really passionate about MWA's work in this space, that it's developed a primary response and a primary infrastructure working from practice, not working in theory.
Thank you. I'd like to take this a bit further with you, Ghaith. You've worked on this for such a long time. What is distinctive about the approach to prevention, specifically in faith communities? What is it that this guide adds in relation to leveraging the faith aspect of the discussion?
I think, Hannah, that at the heart of it is a recognition that each faith community, or regardless of whether it's a faith community or other community that's identified, you identify with a set of values and a set of morals. And if you want people to behave in a particular way or to change their behaviour, you've got to present that in a way that resonates for them without challenging their core beliefs. And so what this guide does, it presents how we did that for the Muslim community, or how we're proposing it happens for the Muslim community, that there is within the value framework of that community the essence for a response to this problem, that we don't have to challenge their values to give them the tools and the language and the artifacts to actually find solutions for themselves. Because, you know, one of the big issues our community in particular has, particularly men within our community, is, and we talk about intersectionality a lot, but for us, it's not a theoretical concept, right? You know, myself, I actually come from a very privileged background within my community. So I have to acknowledge I have a very privileged position. I don't and I haven't suffered the same issues of racism and discrimination that a lot of younger men in my community have. But the reality is, I'm a man working in the DV sector. I'm a brown man working in the DV sector. I'm a brown man of faith, and I'm a brown man of the Muslim faith. All of those things out in the broader society, layer upon layer of people who would form views about me without even knowing me or even saying a word about what I am. Our young men suffer from this every single day. And so there is a huge issue of trust or mistrust of anything that is presented to them that they perceive as wanting to change who they are. So if we can come from a position that says, you know what, we actually not only do we acknowledge who you are, but we actually value who you are as being part of the solution to this. Straight away, you get a very different outcome. You know, one of the biggest challenges I had from a project perspective was actually getting men to come to the workshops. But when they come, the outcome is phenomenal. And so they go back to their community saying, no, it's not what you thought it was, right? You know, the testimonials that you told earlier, one was from a Perth workshop, one was from a Victorian workshop, right? And it's so hard to get people to come, but their eyes just open because they realise that actually we're not challenging them, we're actually empowering them to use their own faith within their communities, but also to be more comfortable having the conversations with the more general public, right? So I think it's just giving them that sense of returning some sense of value and worth into the values that they hold dear to themselves.
That's so powerful. Thank you for that, Ghaith. We've talked a lot about engaging directly with the community. That I like how Nemat put it, that it can't be a top-down approach. It really needs to be bottom-up as well. Britt, I'd like to turn to you. What are some of the challenges for the sector engaging with the community, particularly at that grassroots level, and really reaching the community with these messages?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of challenges. I think that the sector really lacks the tools and resources to be able to do that effectively. I think there's a real challenge with government adequately resourcing the sector to do that work as well. And we're finding that consultation occurs rather than true co-design. And I think we really need to begin to shift away from that, because I think collaboration is really important when it comes to collaborating with communities to develop innovative and effective responses. We often take a one-size-fits-all approach that we know isn't working. We know that the rates of women murdered by family violence are just going up. So we really need to be taking creative approaches to addressing this issue. I do think that there may be some resistance. We often know that the family violence sector will sometimes take that expert approach when it comes to working with communities, and we can't apply an approach. We need to be developing approaches together. We need to be getting that buy-in. In therapeutic practice, we talk about the concept of the violence of knowing. And that's when we assume to know someone's experiences. We assume to know what they've been through, and we may treat groups and communities as homogenous beings. And we can't do that in this work. We need to be creating tailored responses to what is actually a really complex issue.
Hannah, I was going to hand over to you.
Yeah, if I could just get off something that Britt just mentioned there around expertise. Yeah. I think it's really important, and I would hope this would come through the guide, that we don't discount expertise from the sector. In fact, it's critical to the contents of the guide. What the guide says is you can't communicate that expertise, though, in the same way. So let's take that expertise and find the language and the communication channels that are most appropriate for a particular community so we can get that message across, right? And that was why it's really important for us when we're doing that work to do that mapping exercise back against the Our Watch action statements. so that the sector itself could see that we're not actually going against the expertise of the sector. We're actually utilising that very expertise, but in a way that's actually going to get real on the ground change in this community.
I might turn to you, Annabelle, on continuing this discussion about engaging with the community and what are the challenges for the sector. You've talked about this a bit already. If you'd like to just explore that a bit further, or also address the issue of what are the challenges for the community engaging in with the sector. So what are the barriers in the other direction as well?
Yeah, look, and I think those are really interesting questions, Hannah. I'd certainly say that, you know, if I was to say one of the challenges for the sector, it's that historically and even currently, a lot of the way that funding is done on a service delivery approach rather than a capacity building approach. And we actually need to take capacity building approaches if we are going to change the hearts and minds of community on the issues of domestic and family violence. And fundamentally, that's much riskier. It's a little bit more difficult to measure in terms of raw outcomes. You know, you haven't got output numbers to show somebody, but it is the work that yields results. You just can't always see it in the short term. And that's why taking the time it takes to develop these kinds of responses and doing the work that we do on the ground is so incredibly important. And I actually think that, and I would be surprised if Ghaith, in working with communities, you wouldn't find the same thing, which is the case that communities actually want to get involved. They want to have resources. They want to know how they can shift the needle on these things. And if you can provide the channel for people to contribute and to be part of the response, they're knocking the door down, because they see the same headlines that we do in the sector. They see the front page of the paper. They see it's horrific that women and children are dying and being assaulted in numbers. Everybody wants to do something to solve the problem, but when it's a huge problem that feels too big for any one person to be part of the solution, then it's too easy to put aside and say, oh, that's for somebody else. But when you bring something to a community at the local level and say, this is how you can be a part of the solution, this is how you can talk to your network, this is how you can talk to your family, this is how you can talk to your faith community or your service club, those are the ways that we can open those channels, and we see the wealth of goodwill that comes in when we do that. So I actually think that there's probably less barriers from the community side wanting to be part of the solution than we might think there are. We just have to access it in clever ways.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Annabelle. I'd like to pick up on something you just said about the importance of capacity building. In relation to prevention work specifically, I might turn to you, Nemat. What is the importance of capacity building in prevention work?
Capacity building in prevention work, for me, it's everything that there is to do, because and I would like to sort of address this question from a different perspective, and I want to agree with Annabelle completely. It's about changing the framework in which we actually apply it. It's about having, if we want to end violence in a generation, which we all agree to, then we need to take an approach that does factor in a long-term approach, that you know, we need to build fences, build bridges and not build fences around some of these issues. And so Moo, you mentioned that, I wrote it down, I think you mentioned or Maha might have mentioned, around being a compass, and that's what we want this guide to be. We want this guide to be a compass. If you give somebody a map of Sydney, they're only going to know how to navigate Sydney. But if you give somebody a compass, they've got the skills to draw their own map no matter where they are in the world. And so this guide is not just to be, you know, something that sits on the shelf or sits on a digital platform. We actually want it to empower and encourage all of us to be agents of change no matter where we go. So in terms of capacity building, there's a huge especially within the prevention space, there's so much that we need to do, and we need to think long term. We don't need to think short term, because transformative engagement, it does take a walking with and an immersion. It's not about cultural competence or cultural training or faith-centric training. It's about being immersed in this journey together. And I think what this guide and what this project represents is MWA's walking of that journey for the last 4 decades. And that's because of that support and that collaboration and working together that we've been able to have the space to articulate it in this way. Because when we're talking about the history of the sector in the space, we also have to call it out. There has been a lack of the sector wanting to also acknowledge faith in and the role that faith can play within the sector, because there are rightful, legitimate concerns about what that has looked like in the past for different communities and different faith communities. But we need to grow and move beyond that. And we've got the skills and the partnerships to do that in a much more fruitful and effective way. I think it's also important because when we look around, if we look at just what we know about the dynamics of domestic and family violence, around the dynamics of disclosure, sometimes a real challenge from not just the sector, but from government as well, is that it needs to be within the reach of government. It needs to be within the fingertips of that. And that can be a limiting approach, because even though it's safe, what I'm trying to say here is, you know, in terms of building, when the data says around women's help-seeking behaviour, that they will reach into their social response, like they will seek social responses to their help-seeking before they will seek formal responses. And so we need to take that learning from what we know the evidence says. We need to build capacity in terms of response, but also in terms of prevention. And we need to do that in a way which amplifies expertise and doesn't take away from that process. So yeah, I think there's a huge role for capacity building and the way that we do that across each stage of the service continuum.
Thanks, Nemat, and this guide's a great contribution in that regard. And just on what you just said, many of you online will realise this, but the recent personal safety survey of the Australian Bureau of Statistics did show that many victim survivors of domestic family violence seek support from informal networks, very high percentage rather than formal networks. So it's really hit the nail on the head what you just said, Nemat. Another theme that comes through this guide, and something I'd like to explore, is the notion of male identity. Perhaps I'll turn to you first, Ghaith, because I know you've worked a lot on this issue and you're involved directly in many of the workshops with men that led to this guide. Why is it important for the sector to be cognizant of male perceptions of identity?
I think that the thing that we're all aware of is broadly across society at the moment, there is a growing backlash amongst certain cohorts of men around a range of issues. And this issue of, broadly speaking, feminism is one of them. That's happening broadly across society. And although I don't have direct evidence, anecdotally, I think it's causing an issue for us within this sector in terms of the willingness of young men in particular to listen to some of the messages and to take on board what is being said. Now, if that's happening broadly across society, when you then overlay the intersectionality issues that I spoke about earlier, it becomes a far greater issue for certain communities because they're being challenged around their identity as men regardless. And for some communities, and certainly for our faith community, a big part of the response to this issue of domestic family violence is around their role as men. So they're being challenged in broad society around their role as men more broadly, and we're coming from this side challenging their understanding of what their role of men is from a faith perspective, and they're saying, well, who am I? Right? Really, what is my role in society? Because over here you're telling me it's not this, you're now telling me it's not. What is it? Right? So this issue of helping men understand what their role, what their identity really is, and where their sense of value and worth comes from is important. And from our community perspective, it's very fundamental because it's one of the areas where there's a difference around how we perceive certain issues. So if we don't confront that issue of what is masculinity from a Muslim perspective, from an Islamic perspective, and what's the role of men, we will not get sustainable change. We will not get them on board to hear those messages and become those agents for change that we want them to be. You know, one of the really common pieces of feedback I was getting from young men in particular in the workshops was, you know, I knew my faith didn't accept or didn't allow this, but I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know what the principles were that gave me the proof to say it. So they were almost ashamed of being Muslim men because everybody was challenging them on what their religion said about violence. And in their heart, they knew it wasn't right, but they didn't know how to respond to it because of all the cultural overlays that they've collected over time. So helping them really identify with their identity from a faith perspective helps us in stripping away those cultural layers and letting them see actually what their faith really says, and giving them, I guess, the opportunity and the agency to for them themselves to rediscover and reassert who they're and what their identity really is, but in a way which allows them to then say, hang on, no, this is not right. Don't say that. Don't do that. Because they were scared to confront people within their circle on these issues that we all know contribute to violence, whether it's condoning, whether it's disrespect, all of those issues.
Let me throw to Britt, because many of us were at the No to Violence conference a few weeks ago in Melbourne, and these themes of masculinities and male identity, that was a really big focus of the conference. It was a wonderful conference, by the way, so well done, NTV. But what, for you, why is it important for the sector to take into account these male perceptions of identity? It came across at some of the presentations at the conference that this backlash that Ghaith just identified, that there was a very high percentage, more than a third, I think it was, of Australians, especially young men, who thought that women's rights had gone too far, and those sorts of views came across quite high in the research in Australia. So we are seeing this backlash. And so just over to you to talk about some of those points.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the really important things that I want to note is that we all have a role to play in disrupting the relationship between masculinity and violence. And I think that really being able to understand and communicate that gender equality benefits everyone. It isn't about taking something away from men. It's about benefiting everyone and having a future where we can all be safe. And I think that being cognizant of male perceptions of identity, it really influences the advocacy we do for policy change and program development. It really impacts the interventions we use with people who use violence, and the prevention work that we do with men and boys. And I think that understanding that there isn't just one idea of male identity, understanding it from a faith-based perspective, understanding it from a cultural perspective, and ensuring that we're not conflating culture and faith as well. I think that those are really crucial elements. And I think that this guide is a real important contribution to taking a truly intersectional approach when it comes to prevention and response. And I think a really huge part of that is recognizing the role of shame, and what that means for change and accountability, and what this means for safety as well.
Thanks, Britt. I'm just going to ask one more question, and then I'll take some questions from the audience. Annabelle, you've worked in the sector, you've worked in government, you've worked as a lawyer. In your view, what's the role and responsibility of the sector and government in ensuring that communities are safe, and how can we all work together most effectively?
Look, I think there are times where the role of the sector and government is different, and I think there are times where I think we can collaborate. You know, government has a responsibility in spending public money to ensure probity, to do all of those checks and balance things that we need government to do. But what government can also do is work with the sector and empower the sector to do what we do best, which is working with our communities on the ground, with capacity building, with reaching out beyond the boundaries of our sector and engaging our community members to work together towards the Australia that we all want to see, which is one free from violence in a generation. And I think, you know, just on the previous point too, I think it's so important that that government underpins and supports the sector to do these capacity building projects and to bring people outside the traditional sector to this work and to build their understanding around this kind of things. We know the power that positive role modelling and that positive projects to empower communities has a fundamental difference. You know, we see that you can change the hearts and minds of men and boys in getting them involved in positive projects, in encouraging them to be upstanders within their communities and to take roles in leadership, in educating others and bringing others on board. And so anything that government and the sector can do to collaborate on those things will be changing this country for the long term. And that's why I think these kinds of frameworks that can, you know, be released into the wild and that other groups can use and take further and learn from and know that it is evidence-based and underpinned are so important in achieving those aims that we all want to see.
Thanks, Annabelle. I might throw that question to you, Nemat, for the last word before we take some questions from the audience.
Thank you so much. I've been such an honor to be part of this conversation. I think in terms of what we're sort of seeing around the research and the experiences that Ghaith also saw around male identity in this space, and when it's overlaid with some of those cultural and faith considerations as well, is what we're actually seeing is what I think we need to take quite a longer term and strategic approach for. We have shifted the dial around domestic and family violence being not okay. We've succeeded in showing that it's beyond physical violence, that there is coercive and controlling and other elements to this violence, and it's being identified. And what we're also doing is now trying to improve the prevention stream. But as we do that, we have to, while we work to stop it before it starts, we need to be prepared for the fact that people will seek help the more that they can identify until we get to the point that we're stopping it before it starts. So we need to be mindful collectively to make sure that we are working really strategically in the prevention and the response and recovery stage to make sure that it's not mismatched, so that we can actually make sure that the first response is the best response. And in doing so, we're building people's capacity to not engage in those types of behaviors and to be agents of change in their own right. So that's one component. The other thing that I would really like to say is that there are glass cliffs and there are glass ceilings, and there is structural and systemic discrimination that even we as an organisation that's been in this space for 40 years continues to experience. And that is part of our lived experience within the space and within the sector. And so I think that there's a lot in terms of reflective practice, in terms of innovation, to just moving away from traditional modes of operation and default ways of working, that we can hold our own selves accountable in the way that we work in the present and that we move forward. So I think that there's an opportunity to say, even though we are doing amazing work collectively in the space, we can always do better, and we need to be conscious of the own the own challenges that we all experience in trying to amplify and elevate this important work.
Thank you, Nemat. Let me check if we've got any questions that have come in from the audience. I haven't seen any in the chat, but I understand that Feda was collating them. Yeah. Feda, do we have any questions from the audience?
I'm just posting them in the chat now.
Oh, fantastic.
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay. What is the recommended way to implement the guide if we have been hesitant or unsure of how to be inclusive of faith in this space? It's a great question. I might start with Ghaith on that one.
I guess the first one is obviously have a read of it, right? The guide's not meant to be the be all and end all of this. We've actually developed as a separate to the guide itself is some training modules. So if anybody really does do a lot of work with Muslims or the Muslim community, I would really encourage you to explore the training. So there'll be training around the faith principles itself, so that you get a bit more understanding of those, but also around the engagement. So as a mainstream organisation who is dealing with Muslim clients or with Muslim communities, what are some of those principles that you could really bring into how you engage with that? So I guess my first thing is read the guide and then send us an email, give us a call, and we're happy to have a chat and support you in any way we can.
I think
Nemat, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think I might add to that as well. Like in terms of practice, sometimes we don't in trying to be culturally responsive, we don't want to culturally or faith-based way stereotype anybody. So but ways that we can do that is that we can also ask questions, be curious, engage with your clients around what's coming up for them in terms of their faith celebrations. A lot of the time, as Ghaith said, there is a sense of shame that has been experienced, and they won't share unless there are. So be curious and courageous, because it can actually be a time where we can utilize faith as a tool for empowerment in therapeutic practice. You can engage with clients in a way that provides them with spiritual activism that they can lean into. We talk a lot about, it's funny, well, it's not funny, it's just a bit ironic in how we talk about, the dynamics of DFV being, really about power and control. But what Islam actually brings for victim survivors is this sense of controlling what you can control and letting go of what you can't control. And that can be hugely empowering and therapeutic for victim survivors in that space. As well, if you're working, with women with children in their care, utilizing that role as a mother in Islam and what that looks like around, empowering her to be empowered because of the needs of her children. These are all parts of some of the practice that we do in the space, and we can always help build the sector's capacity in how to do that better. So in the prevention space it looks one way, but then in the response and recovery space there's other things that service providers can do, and it's about really having that tool in their back pocket to recognize that it's a tool that it doesn't apply to everyone, but if you can put the ingredients in where it's needed, it's something that can cut across cultural, linguistic, and other divides.
Thanks, Nemat. Annabelle, let me turn to you. You are the chair of the Coercive Control Lived Experience Reference Group. There's a question in the chat. What is the right balance between listening to expertise and lived experience, if there is any?
That's a really, really excellent question, and I think one of the things that I'm always mindful of is that there's a huge overlap between sector and professional expertise and lived expertise, and I think sometimes we can get very much in that binary mode of thinking, it's one or the other. And certainly I know across the workforce in the domestic and family violence sector in New South Wales, there is a huge amount of lived expertise. And I think we need to recognise and honour the testimony of individual victim survivors. There is, the balancing of that and the truth in those stories and the rightness in those stories and experiences of systems, which we need to listen deeply to. There is professional expertise that draws from the aggregate of having spoken to many victim survivors in the space. And I think what we always need to remember as well is that the domestic and family violence movement came from victim survivors in the first place. And therefore, kind of adding it, thinking of it in terms of adding it back in as an ingredient is not really the right way to think about it. This is where it grew from and where it's built. So we need to remember that that victim survivors and their lived experience and the intersection of those experiences, whether that involves faith, culture, all of those elements are an incredibly important part of how we build those responses. And I would say that it is always a balancing of that direct lived expertise testimony with the professional expertise as well.
Yeah, great answer. Britt, did you have anything to add on that question about the balance between lived experience and professional expertise?
Yeah, I probably couldn't say exactly what the exact balance would be, but I think that we should always be using practice-based evidence and evidence-based practice, and incorporating and embedding lived experience rather than using it as, I guess, a tack-on. I think we find that lived experience is not often contradictory to the research and evidence that we use as well. So I think the marriage it's more of a marriage rather than a balance, I should say.
Thanks. I just see there's one more question that's just come in for Ghaith specifically. You mentioned the challenge in getting men to attend the workshops. How do you communicate best to men to get men to attend the session?
Good question. The way in which we went about the workshops is exactly the way I've got in the sector guide. We use that methodology for this very project because we ourselves are a mainstream organisation in a sense, and the last thing we wanted to do was to go in and impose our solutions on those local communities. And so what we did is we engaged with on-the-ground Muslim organisations who come from those communities, know those communities, and could draw into those communities. So, the community in Darwin is very different to the community in Perth, which is different to Sydney and Melbourne. We could have gone there and said, well, we think the answer is 1, 2, 3, but it makes no sense for a community up in Darwin, which is highly professional, as opposed to a community, say, in Perth, which has a very strong overseas student demographic to it, Sydney and Melbourne are third, fourth generation communities. They're completely different. So the way in which we did it was we actually engaged with on-the-ground Muslim organisations and partnered with them. So we build capacity of those organisations for them to be able to continue the work in their communities. So that's part of why we had to, why some workshops took a bit longer, because we had to find the right partner organisations who had reached into the communities. Now, we could have gone out there and just put out and gone directly, and we would have got people, but we wouldn't have got the right people. We wouldn't have got the people who actually needed to hear the message. And so I guess the answer is collaborate with the right organisations to get the outcome you're looking for.
Yeah, well said. So that's going to be our last question for the panel today. Thank you so much to our amazing 4 panellists. If we were all in the room today, I'd ask you to give them a round of applause, but we can give them a virtual round of applause. Thank you so much to everyone. Moo, I'll hand back over to Moo to take us through the rest of the agenda for today. Thanks again, everyone.
Gosh, that was so powerful. Thank you so much, Hannah, for wrangling the conversation, but Nemat, Ghaith, Britt and Annabelle, it just shows you the level and depth of genuine partnership work that we are now at. It's such an exciting time, I think, to be doing this work. I reflect on some of the stuff you were talking about, Ghaith, about language and ways of sharing. I think Nemat, you and I have had these conversations outside of this space. We know that communities are ready to embrace and do this work. And I love the idea of a compass, not a map. There is no one institution or organisation or piece that can fix this, but it has to be a top-down, bottom-up, ground-up, all of us in that soup together, multi-pronged approach to this. And I'd just like to say a huge thank you to everybody that's been involved in the project and got it to this point, and all of the questions as well. That was there were some really great questions there. So thank you to Hannah and everybody for having a great conversation there. I can imagine that being edited and used in all sorts of different places beyond the life of this webinar. It's now my great pleasure to read out a statement from the Honourable Amanda Rishworth, who's the Federal Minister for Social Services, and she was hoping to be able to join us today, but she sent us a written message, which you can see here on your screen. I'm going to try and channel Amanda now. Minister Rishworth says, congratulations to Muslim Women Australia on the launch of the Saving Face Sector Resource Guide today. I want to thank you for extending an invitation for me to attend this launch and for understanding that other commitments have prevented me from accepting. I know the Honourable Justine Elliott, MP, Assistant Minister for Social Services and Assistant Minister for the Prevention of Family Violence, will convey on behalf of the Albanese Government our congratulations to everyone who was involved in the production of this important guide. She says the guide demonstrates that within faiths there exists practical opportunities to respond to family, domestic and sexual violence, grounding this work in the belief and value systems already familiar to men and boys and empowering them to champion women's safety is right at the heart of what the National Plan is aiming to achieve. She goes on to say the National Plan outlines the whole of society approach which is needed over the next decade to achieve this shared vision. And it recognises the vital importance of working on primary prevention with men and boys, acknowledging and addressing the complexities experienced by people from culturally, linguistically and religiously diverse backgrounds. She says men and boys play an important role across all parts of society as people who will work to embed prevention approaches in all settings, not just homes. Men as educators, employers and employees, frontline workers, journalists, legal professionals, sports players, parents, carers, citizens and leaders, including faith and community leaders, can champion change, as well as create the conditions that prevent violence, abuse, discrimination and harassment. Our goal, which is shared by all state and territory governments, is to end violence against women and children within one generation. Violence against women and children is a problem of epidemic proportions in Australia, and the impact of this ripples out across families in Australia, communities and society. To reach the National Plan's vision, sustained and collective action is needed across society. Generational change is required to shift societal attitudes in order to end gender-based violence. She ends by saying, I hope that today's launch is an uplifting one to celebrate the opportunities that we all have to address family, domestic and sexual violence, but also provides an opportunity to reflect and recommit ourselves to the task of creating the generational change which is needed to end violence against women and children for good. Thank you and all the best for the launch. So thank you, Minister Rishworth, for sending those words. I think we can say that we've achieved that today. It was certainly a really uplifting discussion, and I think just the very beginning of some of these conversations and the next pieces of work in this important space. I'd like to introduce now, Fid is going to play us a video montage, I think. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Reverend Stu Cameron, CEO and Superintendent for Wesley Mission. It's our privilege and honour to partner with Muslim Women's Association Australia as you launch your Saving Face sector guide. Now, domestic and family violence is something that touches every demographic, every postcode and every faith tradition. It's a scourge that we must do everything we can to eliminate. It's so important we come together as religious leaders of different faith traditions to empower and strengthen our community to ensure that women and children are safe. So we encourage you to get behind this new initiative. We think it's so important, it's so vital, and it's such an honour to stand with you today.
After 33 years in general practice, I can appreciate the important role GPs can play. In many circumstances, women are reluctant to depart from their abuser because of lack of support. This support has to be culturally, religiously, and linguistically appropriate. And this support has to be holistic and community-based support. Men have very important role to play in their professional or daily life. They can stop the gendered domestic violence before it starts.
Hello, my name is Father Jennifer Bansal. I'm a Coptic Orthodox priest and also ambassador for the Muslim Women's Association. Friends, I speak to the men that I want to say to you that we are against domestic violence. As a religious leader, against domestic violence against women. And as men, we need to support our women. And when we see something wrong that is portrayed against women, we say no. We say no to domestic violence and support a woman, because our women, by the way, are the ones that support us in everything, in our family life and in social life and in society. Friends, let's say no to domestic violence. This is Father Shumansa for Muslim Women Association.
Well, hello there. Really sorry I can't be with you for this really important event. I want to thank Muslim Women Australia for putting this great event on together. Talk about saving face, and there's so many things that I could talk about, but I want to just say, particularly in one of my areas of youth justice, just how important it is, and how important also to recognise the circumstances that young people find themselves in. And sometimes those are the circumstances which make them do things that obviously they have a consequence for. I know that there's also many complexities in society, but the way that we can wrap our arms around people, understanding their context, understanding that all of us can play a part in trying to make things better, is one way that we lead towards understanding and actually breaking that cycle. So I want to thank MWA for the leadership role that they're playing and that really important community role that they play. And I invite all of you to do whatever you can to ensure that we do these wraparound services, that we can break a cycle and that we can make a difference to people's lives. Thank you, and see you soon.
Undoubtedly, Islam provides a robust framework to empower us as a community to prevent violence against women and children. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said, "The most complete of believers in faith are those who are best in character, and the best of you are those who are best to their wives." It's our faith in God that drives the true believer to offer their best to others. So congratulations to the innovative team at Muslim Women Australia for bringing the spirit of the Islamic faith to empower our families, the strongest building block in society today.
Salam alaikum. I want people to be safe, wherever they are, in the street, at work, and at home. None of these places should be dangerous places, but too often they are. We need to make sure in changing behaviour and in making people safe that we start with where people are at. And for so many people, that means starting with an understanding of where people are coming from in terms of their faith. Muslim Women Australia have done this in such a powerful way over so many years, and there are countless women and children who are safer as a result. As a Member of Parliament, I look at the local community, I see so much joy, so much strength, so much effort and organising in making our part of Australia safer for everyone. And that always means acknowledging and respecting what matters to people, their heritage, their story, their family, their faith. And if we do that, then we've got a real pathway for every street, every home, and every workplace to be a safe and loving place to be.
Gosh, that's so powerful, isn't it? I think back, Maha, to I can't remember how many years ago it was now when you brought those men, some of those men together, the MWA ambassadors, and how much work has been done, and how seriously they've taken the responsibility which you gave them on that day. It's really, really remarkable that we're here now. Thank you. I think we have one more video message from the Honourable Jodie Harrison, who's the New South Wales Minister for the Prevention of Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. And then I'm going to ask Maha to close.
I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm recording this from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which you're joining this meeting from, and any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining in. And I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Unfortunately, I'm unable to be with you today on International Day of Peace, but I'm pleased to have the opportunity to celebrate the launch of the Saving Face Sector Guide and the work of Muslim Women Australia. Muslim Women Australia have made an extraordinary contribution to our community through over 40 years of service in the domestic, family and sexual violence sector, working at the intersections of the women's safety and multicultural sectors. I commend your important work in our community and thank the CEO, Haja Maha Abdo, OAM, and Nemat Kharboutli, Manager of Strategic Support, for your commitment to helping vulnerable women. The Saving Face Sector Guide is an important addition to our knowledge of how to engage in culturally, linguistically and religiously appropriate care. It promotes whole-of-community approaches to prevention by delivering important faith-centric resources to the sector and recognising men as part of the solution through a faith-based approach to domestic, family and sexual violence. I encourage you to use the guide in your work. The guide is part of a wider Saving Face project, a federally funded initiative undertaken in conjunction with our Watch. The project aims to raise awareness of the underlying drivers of domestic, family and sexual violence and builds capacity to respond and create incredible programs. Islamic principles are at its foundation. It uses faith as a tool to empower men within the Muslim community to prevent violence against women and children. It continues Muslim Women Australia's proud history of service to the sector and our community. The New South Wales Government has had a long history of working with Muslim Women Australia. The development of this guide is representative of Muslim Women Australia's approach to working collaboratively within the sector and building strong partnerships to keep women and children safe from violence. The government values our partnership and collaboration with you and the non-government sector generally as we work towards achieving the vision of the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children and our state plans. We can't do this work without the support of the domestic, family and sexual violence sector. We value the specialist and lived expertise that you bring to the table and co-design processes in the work that we do where we can. Well done again to Muslim Women Australia on this momentous launch of the Saving Face Sector Guide. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, Minister Harrison. My friends, my work is done. I'm going to pass you over to the exceptional Maha to close today's special event. A huge thank you to everybody who has participated. Thank you for inviting me along to be a part of this. And I look forward to being on the journey with everybody here who's attended today for the next piece. There's much important work to be done post this conversation. Thank you, Maha.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I sincerely appreciate the leadership here and each and every one of you for coming on to support this amazing work that I never thought it would actually be in my lifetime, to be honest. I'm lost for words, and you know when I'm lost for words. But from my heart to your heart, I think what we've come up with is a compass, right? It's not a map. You use the compass and it directs you where you need to go, and clearly seeing that the panel, thank you so much to each and every one of you for bringing your heart, your mind and your soul into a body where it needs healing, and healing can only happen in recovering through that traumatic informed practice and principles, and you do that and you've done that so well. There's so much that we can take from, and I'm hoping that this is just a stepping stone in the journey that we're all going to be taking on together at different levels. And Annabelle, sincerely thank you for bringing your heart and reminding me of that we are one of the founders. And I remember when our voice was very silent. I wasn't silent, but our voices were being silenced because women were just trying to find their feet on the ground because they had been experiencing violence and they need to work with what they had. So there was a new social issue that was always a private thing. So while I was ready to talk about the Islamic principles, the community in the mainstream was not ready. Neither was my community anyway. But now we're bringing that back together, and I say that beacon of hope that really shines a light through each and every one of you, and recognizing that your light is with us, and reminding me the first time we brought the men together for our ambassador program, that is not just for men to be champions, but to men to take on their responsibility and accountability seriously. And for no to violence, and acknowledging that Lizette is not feeling well and she is in hospital. And thank you, Britt, for coming into her space and doing an amazing work. Bring your heart and mind into the space, collaborating with us too, and sending our prayers of healing to Lizette. And thank you to Nemat. Nemat is amazing in the work that Nemat does as a young woman, really leading the way in such an amazing, creative, innovative way that is collaborative as well, and that brings the Islamic principles into life, into action, which is on the International Day of Peace is just making me more at ease that it's here. Thank you, Dr. Hannah Tonkin, for your your partnership, your sincerity that you bring into the space. From day one when we met you, we could feel that engagement. It was not them and us, it was all of us together. And then for Michaela Cronin to bring that, and I remember, you know, there's so many women to thank and so many men to thank. And I have to, from my heart to Ghaith's heart, and reminding me, yes, we've walked this path together for over a decade, Ghaith, and thank you so much for putting up with my ranting sometimes and for my, you know, whatever. But look, we got here, and this guide is not just a guide. Please don't leave it on the shelf. Use it as a compass. Use it to get to where you want to go. Utilize our expertise, and we will go and we'll take this partnership to another level. We do want to be building capacity in every corner of where it's needed, not just at a platform where it's everyone sees. Where places where it's not seen is where we get to see as well. And we want to bring you into that space. And we want, as Britt rightly said, you want to have a right marriage, the right formula. And the formula is there, but how do we engage that? I call that like we bring the ingredients of the currency of the heart into a space, and you utilize different ingredients at different times. And we want to be able to use that compassion and mercy to drive it through so that we begin the process of authentic partnership and collaboration and co-design, not just on paper, but bringing academia into the real frame of where we're going, and bringing the men along with us, and whoever wants to be with us, everyone is welcome. And sincerely appreciate all of you, and thank you so much. Again, I need to acknowledge our Indigenous brothers and sisters in the space as well, and we carry you with us in our hearts. So please today, as you see on your screen, you can actually click the link and it takes you to the form where you can put your interest about training or any information that you want to request a copy of the guide. We will send that to you, and to access it online, you can access it there. So Fida, thank you so much for the back end stuff. It's been amazing running this online with clarity, and thank God there was not much hiccups that we could see, but I'm sure Fida was doing that behind the scene. Thank you so much, everybody, and sincerely appreciate your friendship, your collaboration, and look forward to working with you and getting to know the people that we don't know, and those that we do know. Let's work together, and let's work together differently. Thank you so much, and assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. And on this International Day of Peace, let's bring an avalanche of peace into a stream where it takes us to the pond where we can all be cool and cool our hearts. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you all.